Hello and welcome back to Hooks Crochet. In this review, I want to be completely transparent and wind several different types of yarn that I have. I will be winding your standard acrylic yarn, like this impeccable, let me just move this, impeccable by Loops and Threads. I also have some Bernat blanket yarn that I want to wind up, see how that goes. I'm also going to wind up some of this Soft and Shiny by Loops and Threads. It's a mercerized yarn, so it's a little bit more slippery, so I'm curious to know how that's gonna wind up. And I also have this boucle yarn that my mother-in-law gave me from one of her former projects, and she had this left over, so I want to get this wound up because it doesn't store well the way that it is right now. Yarn winder came in 2 pieces. Actually, I guess 3, because this piece comes off. This is your spool, and if you look here, it's got kind of like a keyhole thing going on. So you just put it on, twist it on, and it stays there. But this arm actually came not connected to the motor. I'm not a handy person, so if you're worried about putting this together, don't be worried, because I'm not handy at all and I put this together just fine. It comes with the Allen key, so you don't need any other hardware to put it together. So don't worry about having to run to Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever your local hardware store is to pick up any other tools, because you don't need them. There's the power button, which is fairly standard. And there's different speeds, so you can turn it to the right to speed up, and then turn it to the left to slow down, and then if you turn all the way to the left, it'll just click off. I think that's kind of the basics of the machine. It does sound like it's got a pretty powerful motor, so that's good. It does come with a clamp. I'm going to try it without the clamp. I have a pretty sturdy table, so we'll see how that goes. So I'm going to make a couple knots at the tail end of your skein. Make a fairly big knot. And then on your spool is 2 notches, and you're going to put the knot into one of those notches. And, oops. You kind of want to pull down on it. I'm going to hold it just so it doesn't come out. And then you're going to take the yarn and, moving on the right side, just kind of wrap it around until it goes through this coiled yarn guide. And then it's kind of hard to see, but there's a little slot that you put the yarn in through here. And this is kind of a tension thing that you can adjust to make it looser or tighter. And then just wrap it around this other guide again. And then now we're ready to turn the machine on. So I'm going to start it off slow. So I'm just going to stop that while I untangle this, which this is not a reflection on the winder. It's more of a reflection on how this skein was wound up, but that's okay. Everything's going fine. So the reason that I'm holding the yarn and kind of allowing it to pass through my hand before it goes into the guides is because I want to catch any knots, because sometimes manufacturers will tie together 2 pieces of yarn. It's really annoying, but so I just want to be able to make sure that I catch any knots so that I can either clip them, rush and join them, or you don't have to. And then continue on with winding it up. So things are going fairly smoothly, so I'm just going to speed it up a little bit. So I do want to stop it. I just want to make sure that this is on tight, because it kind of looks like it was getting a little wonky. And we'll just start it up again. So it kind of seems like you have to find a speed that you're comfortable with the machine going at. I don't think this is something that you can just set up and forget. My concern would be if there was a knot or a cluster that kind of got stuck here and the motor is still trying to pull it through. I would worry that you would burn out the motor, but it seems like it's a pretty strong motor. So I'm not sure if that would be a concern or not, but I don't think this is something that, like I said, you can just set up, forget, and walk away. Okay, so I'm gonna pause it right here. I noticed my skein of yarn, it was laying flat on its side. I want to lay it kind of like this so that I can still pull from the inside. I'm just worried that if I have it on its side, it's going to start to tangle up. So we do have a knot. And I'm just going to back it out a little bit. Get that untangled. Alright, so we got that knot out. And we'll just start that up again. So I've actually laid the skein inside a container on the floor, just so I can run it through both hands. You can't see my one hand on camera, but I just want to be able to make sure that I catch any knots, because the skein is getting kind of tangled up. So I'm just going to slow it down a little bit just to make sure that I catch these tangled up bit. Alright, so if you don't have any of these clips, I would strongly encourage you to get some. It is just, it was not my idea. Somebody else has done it. But it works really well for clipping the yarn end to the outside of the cake. So I want to pull it off the spool. I suppose you could leave it on too, but I just wanted to see, I just wanted to show you what it looks like all wound up. And to take it off, you just pull it right off. And now you have a center pull cake. So for the second cake, I'm going to do the mercerized acrylic. I think it's acrylic. Yeah, right here. It's acrylic. This one has a center pull ready to go. I'm going to pull it out a little bit just to make sure there's no immediate knots. There's not, so that's good. And like I did the first time, I'm going to make a couple knots in the same spot. Now this one, I'm concerned that because it's so slippery that it's not going to stay on the spool. So I guess trial and error, we'll see what it does. So just put it in the little notch up there, wrap it through that guide, through the tension guide, and then through the second guide. And we will start. Oh. So it's working better than I thought. So we'll see how it goes. So I am noticing that the machine is quite loud. So I guess if you don't mind having a loud TV on, you could do this while watching your favorite show. I'm not sure how anyone else in the house is going to feel about it. Okay, so not gonna lie, I am pleasantly surprised at how well this mercerized yarn wound up. There were a few knots that I decided to leave for a couple reasons. I don't want to have a bunch of little mini cakes from the same skein. I'd rather just put one skein into one cake. This one you could probably even get away with making a bigger cake with maybe 2 skeins of yarn, but for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to do the one skein. So I'm just going to compare the sizes. This one is the 4-weight acrylic, and this is a 4-weight acrylic mercerized. So again, you could probably get away with doing 2 skeins of this mercerized into one bigger cake if you wanted to. That's up to you. But again, I am really pleasantly surprised at how well this wound up. I did not think it would wind up nicely at all. I'm interested to know how it would unravel. Maybe that's not the right word. Because it is a center pull. And I would probably use the outside and just put this in a yarn bowl and pull from the outside, just because it's mercerized and it's a bit slipperier. And so I'm worried that this would collapse on each other if you were to use the center pull while doing your project, and then it would just kind of become a jumbled mess. But that's trial and error. I would have to figure that out later on down the road. So for this bulky yarn, I think this would be a bulky or a jumbo. I don't know. Whichever it is. I'm concerned it won't fit through the guides. Again, I'm going to do 3 knots in the same spot. So it did fit through the guide. And through the tension guide as well. So I am noticing that this little arm here is getting some fibers kind of fluffed from the yarn onto it, but again, you could just keep a little brush or something to kind of keep that clean. So my concern is down here, if there's fibers getting into here, how it could maybe clog up some gears maybe. So I would use that compressed air that you use to clean your computer keyboards. I would maybe keep a can of that handy just so you could kind of blow it into here and see if there's any fluffs happening in there. So I'm going to get started on this guy. So it's going to take a bit more juice to get this flowing. Oh, we got a knot already. And this busted. So this is more of a yarn issue than a winding issue. So I'm going to just discard that. And I don't trust this knot. So I'm going to clip that off and make my own knot. Okay, let's try this again. So, put that through there. On the first, oops, it's not staying in. Okay, so this is more of a yarn issue that I'm having. It's quite soft and slippery, so let's get You know what? I'm going to pull some yarn out of the skein first because it's quite tight, and I'm concerned that it's not going to make a good base wind, if that makes any sense. So let's try that. So yeah, it does take a little bit more power to get this chunky yarn. Oh, we're stuck again. Okay, so we're not off to a good start with the chunky yarn. Get that going again. So it seems to be winding really nice. I just think the Bernat blanket yarn, like you're gonna have to, oh, that doesn't sound healthy. Like pre-pull the skein out of the ball of yarn until it becomes a little bit looser. Because you know when you first start from a center pull skein, how it's kind of tight when you pull it out. Whereas this, let's try that. So we pulled some out. So yeah, it's winding nicely. But I think with the Bernat blanket yarn or a similar Chanel type yarn, I think you would need to completely pull it out. I'm just going to give it a little bit more juice just to make it easier to wind it up. So I don't know if you can hear the difference between the winding of the 4-weight yarn versus this weight. It does sound like the machine's working a little bit harder to wind this, so I'm not sure I'm a fan of that because I don't want to wear out the motor. So I have this on max now, and it's still kind of struggling to work. So I would strongly encourage you to unravel the whole skein of this Bernat blanket before winding it. And we're kind of getting to the end, so it's going to start getting all tangly. And if you're thinking about how much the ends of the skein get tangled up, either way, whether you were winding these skeins into balls or using a winder, you would still have to untangle it. So I'm not gonna reflect that opinion of my winder into my opinion of the winder, just because I don't think it's kind of fair to the winder. I don't know, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, so the end of the skein got a little tangled up. So again, that's not a reflection on the winder, but I feel like the Bernat yarn may not be the best fit just because it seems like it takes a lot of motor power to get one skein rather wound up. So again, it does make a nice cake. So if you're willing to put the wear and tear on your machine, why not? It's quite tight in there. So yeah, it made a nice cake, but it's just that the motor power that it needs kind of is a bit worrisome for me. So the last yarn I'm going to use is this Boucle Bear yarn. I'm not sure what it's made of. So it's 97% acrylic, 3% polyester. Kind of has these bumpy little knot things. I'm going to make my own knot. 3 times. thread it through like we did before. So this, even though this yarn is quite thin, it's actually considered a bulky 5 weight, which kind of surprises me. I'm having to pull it out of the skein because it's not coming out quite nicely, but it seems to be winding up nicely. I'm just going to turn up the, there we go. Actually, that's working really nice. Because this is a big skein, I think I'm probably going to have to make 2 cakes out of this. I think this is winding up better than the other yarns. The first one, the acrylic, wound up pretty good, but this one is giving me like no issues whatsoever. It was wound nicely from the factory, which is making it wind up nicely here. But again, this is an old skein, so I wonder if that has anything to do with it, because they just don't make things the way they used to. I'm just going to grab one of these clips. Actually, I'll cut right there. So I really like how this cake wound up. It's really, really nice, actually. I just wanted to address a few things that may have crossed your mind while watching this review video. And that is, one of the things is, what do we do with our labels? Because I don't like holding on to these, but we do need them to figure out what the washing instructions are and what have you. So what I did is I just went onto my computer and made labels like this that I can cut out, and I just attach them with a clip to the cake of yarn. Something else you could do if you are the type who wants to keep your label is, before you start winding the yarn, you can wrap this around the spool. Wrap the label around the spool. You may want to tape it or just to secure it while it's wrapping, and then just pull it out with the yarn once it's done. Or you can just fold it up, and instead of using one of these guys, you can just clip your label into the yarn like that. I find this is a bit bulky and it's not as neat and tidy, and that's why I decided to go with my own labels. If you're interested in a copy of these labels, you can send me an email at newmancc86@gmail.com, newmancc86@gmail.com, and I will put that on the screen, and I will email you a PDF copy of this sheet.